How do filmmakers make their movies and shows look so unbelievably good? While commercials for camera equipment will try to convince you that it's all about using fancy, expensive gear, you might be surprised to hear that lighting is arguably the most important tool to creating captivating visuals. Yes, even more so than the camera or lens you use. And in this video, I'll show you 15 different lighting terms that you'll need to know as a filmmaker by showing you the techniques used in actual films and explaining what they are. This is Filmmaking 101 with me, Ethan Avery. Okay, let's start off with the first term, which is number 1, hard light. It's easy to remember because it has hard edges between the light and the shadow, versus number 2, soft light, which has a much softer transition from light to shadow. Hard light is created from small and or far away light sources, while soft light is created from large and or close light sources. Next up is probably the most popular way of lighting things professionally. Number 3, three-point lighting, which will break down in 3 parts. A, the key light, which is the main light in the scene. Then B, the secondary or fill light, which gives some light to the other side of our subject. And finally, the back or hair light, which adds some depth and separation for our subject from the background. Here's an example of my setup. There's my key light, here's my fill light, and this here is my backlight. Okay, now that we've talked about lighting setup, let's talk about how to use that light. On to number 4, high key lighting. This is bright and often colorful, and is the look when the brightness of the entire shot is relatively high, but the level of contrast is rather small. This is what you'll typically see in sitcoms and those overly happy commercials. As opposed to number 5, low key lighting, which is more dramatic with much more pronounced shadows and a much bigger difference in contrast. Look here how far apart the darker and lighter parts of the still is compared to high key lighting. Low key lighting is used much more often when you're going for a more dramatic look. Let's move on to number 6, broad lighting. This is when we place our main or key light at the same angle of the camera. This is opposed to number 7, short or narrow lighting, where we key from the opposite side of the camera. Narrow lighting is more typically used in cinematic shooting. Now, number 8, practical lighting. These are lights in a scene like lamps or torches that create light themselves. On the other side, we have number 9, motivated light, which is faking real light, like using lights to simulate sunlight, for example. Which, by the way, number 10, natural or available light, is what we call light from the sun or any other source of light that comes from the world naturally. But not all light looks the same, of course, so let's quickly go over number 11, color temperature. On the lower end, we have warm lights like candles and the incandescents you might have at home, but as we move up the scale, we get cooler lights like fluorescent bulbs and daylights. Notice how the chart goes from orange to white to blue. Now let's finish off here talking about lighting faces with number 11, flat lighting. This is when there's very little shadows or contrast shown, whereas number 12, butterfly lighting, also known as paramount or beauty lighting, is when the light is placed above our subject's face, creating butterfly-like shadows underneath their nose. It was a popular technique used back in the day with Paramount Pictures, hence the name. Then we have number 13, loop lighting. This is when we see the shadows on the nose starting to bend onto the cheek. And if we keep going with our angles, we'll find number 14, Rembrandt lighting. This is when the shadows creep even further and form a sort of triangle of light on the cheek. This style is named after the famous Dutch painter Rembrandt himself. And finally, we have number 15, split or side lighting. And this is a half and half type light coming straight from the side of the subject's face. And now that you know these terms, the next challenge is finding a way to use them to tell the best story possible. How to do that? Well, that part is up to you.